Louis Armstrong, I would think, really the most inspiring figure in jazz, certainly the kind of jazz I like, the most influential, the man who did the most for it, I think, too, really. When I was a child, I liked classical music. My father was an amateur violinist, quite a good one, I think. And he had classical music records, Beethoven, Bach, and so on. And I know I liked those records very much when I was like 7 years old. And in fact, my parents had also dance music on record, and I didn't like those. I used to break those, I'm told. That may have been jealousy, not because they used to dance to them. Who knows? It's possible. Freudian. I wouldn't know. But I liked the Beethoven. And then he bought me a little violin, a child size, and then when I was 12, he bought me also a 3/4 size violin, and I began getting lessons. At the same time, I became aware for the first time when I was about 12 of popular music. In fact, of jazz eventually, but first of all, popular music. You see, in Britain, as in probably most other European countries before World War II, there was not much broadcasting of really rough and ready popular music. Broadcasting was really rather high-minded and high class and deliberately careful and intellectual and so on. And it was only with the need to fill hours and hours and hours of radio time with something between the hoped for news broadcasts of good news from the war in World War II that caused them to fill that space with popular music. And so for the first time, one had the popular records of the day, the ones that the people really liked, played on the radio over and over and over again. Some of them were awful. But one heard them, and I heard them for the first time. I'd been shielded from them, I suppose, by my environment. And then, having heard that, I found some of it okay and some of it pretty awful. And then one day, a disc jockey, or as they called it then, a presenter, played a record and said this was jazz. And it sounded different, and I liked it. So I wrote home to my father where I was in school. Our school was in the country, away from London and the bombs. And I wrote home to my father. I think it was the only time I wrote home in 3 years at that school, saying I heard some jazz on the radio and could he please send me some? So he was very sensible. He didn't know about jazz, although he knew its existence. He had been aware when he was at Cambridge University of certain jazz people who played there and studied there at the time, and he had heard the music, but wasn't really. He knew it was all right, but he didn't know much about it. So he bought a magazine, a gramophone, and there was a jazz reviewer, and there were various records reviewed. 2 of them that month got 5 stars. The reviewer was a man called Edgar Jackson, who I came to know later. The other record was by Harry James, Old Man River, which was a kind of a imitation Cootie Williams record. But Coleman Hawkins' Body and Soul was the one, the real one, and that's one of the all-time great jazz records. He sent it to me, and I liked jazz. I discovered I liked jazz, so I then began reading about it and trying to find out about it and going to record shops. Of course, in Britain during World War II, there was a shortage of shellac, of the kind of plastic which is used to make the old 78 records. And this meant that not the only records they produced, which they used the very scarce material for, were the ones which were wanted by the mass of people, which was Vera Lynn, the singer, for example. And fortunately, where I was at school, which was near Cambridge, Cambridge had been, of course, as a university town, one of the seats of jazz appreciation in Britain in the 30s. So the record shops in Cambridge had actually jazz records in stock, the ones that they'd bought in hoping to sell in 1938, and then nobody happened to buy them. So there were still some old records in stock. So I could buy those, and I bought books about it. There were, Cambridge again, a good place to buy books about unusual subjects, being a university town. So I learned about it, and I found myself immediately drawn to this jazz music. And within a year, I was buying such records as you could of Louis Armstrong and King Oliver, all these early jazz names, and also blues records I got interested in right away. And I read books about it, which were very interesting indeed to me. And it seemed to strike some kind of a chord in me, I don't know what, or why it should. And So I never looked back. By the time the school moved back to London at the end of World War II, when I was 16, I had about 200 78s, which is a lot really, because in comparison to earnings and pocket money in those days, they cost a lot of money. But I somehow had those records, and that got me interested. There I was. Suddenly I was a 100% crazy jazz fan.